You know that person in your life who always seems 3 steps ahead? The one who turns every conversation into a chess match, who knows exactly which buttons to push, who makes you question your own reality? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Manipulators only win because most people play by rules that don't exist in their world. But what if you could beat them at their own game? What if the very principles that make Machiavelli's name synonymous with cunning strategy could become your shield and your sword? Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, you're going to learn something that changes everything about how you handle the master manipulators in your life. Let's start with something Machiavelli understood better than almost anyone in history. Knowledge is the ultimate weapon. A manipulator thrives on information asymmetry. They know things about you that you don't know about them. They've studied your patterns, your triggers, your weaknesses. So the first Machiavellian principle is simple but brutal in its effectiveness. Become a collector of information. Watch everything. Listen to what they say and what they don't say. Notice patterns in their behavior. When do they push hardest? When do they back off? What topics make them uncomfortable? A true Machiavellian never reveals their hand while constantly studying everyone else's cards. Keep a mental file on the manipulator. Document conversations if necessary. The moment you start seeing their patterns, their power over you begins to crumble. But here's where most people make their first critical mistake. They think that once they see the manipulation, they should confront it directly. They want to call it out, to have that big dramatic moment where they expose the manipulator for what they are. This is exactly what you should not do. Machiavelli would tell you that revealing what you know is like a general announcing his battle strategy to the enemy before the fight begins. Instead, you stay quiet. You observe. You let the manipulator think they're still in control. This isn't weakness. This is strategic patience. The manipulator's greatest vulnerability is their confidence that you don't see what they're doing. Let them keep that confidence. It makes them sloppy, overconfident, predictable. Now let's talk about emotional control, because this is where manipulators absolutely dominate most people. They're experts at triggering emotional reactions. They say something that makes you angry, and suddenly you're defending yourself, explaining yourself, justifying your actions. The moment you react emotionally, you've lost. Machiavelli understood that emotions are tools, not masters. When dealing with a manipulator, you need to develop what I call strategic emotional distance. This doesn't mean becoming cold or robotic. It means you consciously choose which emotions to display and when. A manipulator says something designed to hurt you. You respond with calm curiosity instead of pain. They try to provoke anger. You show mild amusement. They expect fear. You demonstrate indifference. This absolutely destroys their playbook because manipulators feed on predictable emotional reactions. When you stop providing the reaction they're fishing for, they lose their primary weapon. Here's a principle that sounds almost too simple but is devastatingly effective. Give them nothing. Manipulators need information to work with. They need your secrets, your fears, your desires, your weaknesses. So you become a vault. You master the art of the pleasant non-answer. Someone asks about your plans. You keep it vague. They probe into your personal life. You redirect with a question. They try to get you to commit to something. You buy time with phrases like, "I'll think about it," or "Let me get back to you on that." Machiavelli advised his prince to be like a fox, clever and cautious. In modern terms, this means you control the information flow absolutely. Share nothing that can be weaponized against you later. Every detail you give a manipulator is ammunition they will use when it benefits them most. Now we get into some advanced territory. Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. With a manipulator, you need to establish something they rarely encounter: consequences. Most people are so focused on being nice, on avoiding conflict, on keeping the peace that manipulators face zero real consequences for their behavior. This has to change. You need to establish clear boundaries and enforce them with absolute consistency. The key word here is consistency. A boundary you enforce sometimes is not a boundary at all, it's a suggestion. When a manipulator crosses a line, there must be a consequence every single time. This doesn't mean dramatic confrontations. It can be as simple as ending the conversation, leaving the room, or declining the next invitation. The manipulator needs to learn through direct experience that manipulating you costs them something. Machiavelli understood that people respond to incentives and disincentives. Right now, manipulating you has all reward and no risk for them. You're going to flip that equation. Let me share something that might sound controversial but is absolutely crucial. You must be willing to use their tactics against them when necessary. This doesn't mean becoming a manipulator yourself. It means understanding that when someone refuses to respect normal social contracts, you sometimes have to speak their language. If a manipulator uses guilt, you can strategically use it back. If they use social pressure, you can apply the same. If they twist your words, you can clarify in ways that put them on the defensive. Machiavelli was crystal clear about this. When dealing with those who do not act in good faith, you cannot handicap yourself by adhering to rules they've already abandoned. This is about strategic adaptation. You're not adopting their character, you're adopting tactical flexibility. There's a huge difference between being a manipulator and being willing to use manipulation tactics defensively when someone attacks you with them first. Here's something powerful that Machiavelli practiced religiously. Alliances matter more than almost anything else. A manipulator often works to isolate you. They want you alone, unsupported, doubting yourself. Your counter-move is to build and maintain strong relationships with others. Talk to people the manipulator has also dealt with. You'll often discover you're not the only target. Build a network of people who see through the manipulation. This serves multiple purposes. First, it validates your perception of reality when the manipulator tries to gaslight you. Second, it provides witnesses and support. Third, it creates social consequences for the manipulator when others start comparing notes about their behavior. Machiavelli built his entire political career on understanding that power is networked. An isolated individual is vulnerable. A person embedded in strong relationships is nearly impossible to manipulate effectively. Let's talk about something that might feel uncomfortable but is absolutely essential. You have to be willing to walk away. This is your nuclear option, and the manipulator needs to know it exists. Machiavelli advised that a prince should never become so dependent on anyone that they lose the ability to make independent decisions. In your life, this means you cultivate options. You never put yourself in a position where you absolutely need the manipulator for anything critical. Whether this is a work relationship, a friendship, or even a family connection, you maintain your independence. You build your life so that if the manipulation becomes too costly, you can simply remove yourself from the equation. The interesting thing is that often just having this option, just knowing you could walk away, changes your entire energy in the relationship. You stop negotiating from a position of weakness. The manipulator senses this shift, and it fundamentally alters the power dynamic. Now, here's a principle that separates amateurs from masters. You must think several moves ahead. Manipulators are always planning. They're thinking about how today's conversation sets up tomorrow's manipulation. You need to match this or exceed it. When a manipulator asks you something, don't just think about the immediate question. Think about why they're asking now. What are they setting up? What will they do with your answer? Where is this conversation heading 3 exchanges from now? Machiavelli was obsessed with anticipation. He studied how actions today create circumstances tomorrow. Start thinking like this. When you see a manipulation coming before it arrives, you can prepare your response, control the narrative, or simply sidestep the whole trap before it's even fully set. Let me tell you something about timing, because this is where battles are won or lost. Machiavelli understood that the same action taken at different times produces completely different results. When dealing with a manipulator, you need to choose your moments carefully. Don't respond to every provocation immediately. Sometimes the most powerful response is delayed, given after you've had time to think, after the manipulator has moved on and thinks they've won. Other times, an immediate response cuts off an entire line of manipulation before it develops. Learn to read the situation. When is the manipulator most vulnerable? When are they overextended? When have they made a mistake they haven't realized yet? These are your moments to act. Patience combined with perfect timing is an almost unbeatable combination. Here's something subtle but incredibly effective. Master the art of strategic agreement. When a manipulator makes an unreasonable demand or states something obviously false, the natural response is to argue or refuse. Sometimes the Machiavellian move is to agree, but in a way that commits you to nothing. That's an interesting perspective. Doesn't mean you accept it. I'll keep that in mind doesn't mean you'll act on it. You might be right doesn't mean you believe them. These responses deflate the manipulator's power because they can't argue with agreement. They're expecting resistance, and instead they get a polite acknowledgement that gives them nothing to work with. This is linguistic judo. You're using their expectation of conflict to create a situation where there's nothing for them to push against. Meanwhile, you've lost nothing and committed to nothing. Let's address something important. The manipulator will eventually realize you've changed the game. When this happens, expect escalation. They'll try harder. They'll bring out bigger weapons. They'll attempt to provoke stronger reactions. This is actually a sign you're winning. Machiavelli would tell you that when your enemy changes tactics, it means their previous tactics stopped working. Stay calm during this phase. Don't let the escalation pull you back into old patterns. If anything, this is when you need to be even more disciplined, even more strategic. The manipulator is testing to see if your new approach is real or just temporary. Show them it's permanent through unwavering consistency in your responses. Something crucial that people forget. Your goal isn't to defeat the manipulator in some dramatic final confrontation. Your goal is to make manipulating you unrewarding and too costly to maintain. Machiavelli understood that the best victories are the ones where the enemy simply stops attacking because it's no longer worth their effort. You want to become what I call a low-value target, too aware to be easily fooled, too controlled to be emotionally manipulated, too boundaried to be pushed around, too networked to be isolated, too independent to be trapped. When you present this profile consistently, most manipulators will eventually shift their attention to easier targets. They're predators, and predators prefer prey that doesn't fight back effectively. Here's your final principle, and it's the one that ties everything together. Never forget that the manipulator's greatest weakness is that they fundamentally underestimate people. They see others as tools, as objects to be used. This blinds them to the possibility that someone might be matching their strategy, might be learning their patterns, might be building a counter-strategy while appearing compliant. Use this blindness. Let them think you're still the same person you were before you learned these principles. Let them believe they're still in control right up until the moment they realize they're not. Machiavelli's prince succeeded not through obvious strength, but through appearing one way while being another. You do the same. So here's what this all comes down to. Manipulators win because most people don't even realize they're in a game. Now you know you're in a game. You know the rules they're playing by. You know the principles that let you not just defend yourself, but take control of every interaction. You become the person who can't be manipulated because you see too much, reveal too little, and play the long game better than they do. If this changed how you think about dealing with the manipulators in your life, drop a comment below and tell me which principle hit you hardest. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's dealing with a master manipulator and doesn't know how to fight back, share this with them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is show them that they're not powerless, that there's a way to win. These principles work, but only if you use them. So take what you've learned here and go level the playing field.